Chapter 21. The following day I requested to see the warden right away, and I told him that my first day out would be tomorrow. As expected, he granted my request without question because I had his little favor taken care of. I then went back to my cell and started making my makeshift shank that had Ames' name all over it if he tried to stop me in any way from taking little Sarah. I melted the handle of my toothbrush and inserted a razor blade into the end. After the plastic cooled, I began scraping the end on the floor to create a point. It's a funny thing about plastic once it's melted into a knife-like shape. It is as hard as metal. All you really need is enough of a point so that it pierces the skin. In about an hour, I had my weapon of choice, and I knew just what to do with it if he tried to stop me. The following day, bright and early, I made my way back to Cleveland. To my surprise, I had no issues getting rides to my destination. All I had to do was put my thumb out and someone would pick me up, and before I knew it, I was back by Sarah's house. I sat around most of the day running through what I'd do if I had to confront Ames in his house. I waited until it was getting dark so that I could be less noticeable. I remember when Sarah brought Chev and I in, we went through the side door of the house because she said that this particular door will not lock because the house foundation is settling and it causes the door not to lock. I could see Ames' police vehicle in the driveway, and it was pretty much dark, so I made my way to the side of the house. Almost immediately, that damn dog started barking just like I remembered from the last time I was here. I guess I should have been uptight about this, or at least a little nervous, but it was my daughter I was talking about. And in the business world, there's an old adage my dad taught me, A equals A, which means things are things and must be dealt with. I knew I had already ridden this bike and could kill someone if I needed to. With Ames out of the way, I could have a better chance of clearing my name and getting myself out of the hellhole I was in for an eternity. I leaned against the house and poked my head out just enough so I could see into the kitchen area. I could see in the back of the house that a light was on. I looked a little longer to see if anyone else might be in the house walking around, but by indication, Ames looked to be alone. It was perfect. I'd sneak in, grab little Sarah, hide her, and be back to the prison before Ames had any clue what hit him. I grabbed the door handle and slowly pushed the door open. I took a step into the kitchen, and the wood floor creaked a bit. I stopped because every little sound is exaggerated when you're trying to sneak up on someone. I could hear something in the background, but really couldn't make it out, so I turned my head and put my cupped hand around my ear in the hopes that I could hear a little better. It was a lullaby. I could hear little Sarah talking to herself in what must have been her bedroom. Suddenly I had second thoughts because I forgot all about the fact that little Sarah might be here. What if I had to kill Ames? Do I really want to kill her grandfather while she's here? I churned this over in my head and quickly decided that regardless, I had to do this or it's going to be me. I crept forward toward the back rooms while I removed the shank from my pocket. As I got closer, I could feel my heart rate increasing, and I was directly in front of the door little Sarah was in. It was dark, but I could see her silhouette moving in her crib. I took a few more silent steps, and I could now see Ames' back. He was sitting in an office chair at the desk in the other room. I knew now that I had to change my plan because I could never get little Sarah out without him knowing. I had to think quickly, so I figured that I wouldn't kill him, but I'd just disable him so he could not fight back when I took little Sarah. It was perfect. He'd never even see me coming. I grabbed tighter onto the shank to ready myself for my attack. The plastic made a cracking sound as I squeezed. With each leopard-like step, I came closer to the pounce, till I was directly behind Ames. I could feel the rage as I thought about all he had done to me and how it had just ruined my life. I brought my hand back with the intention to stick this bastard so I could get what was rightfully mine. I started to thrust my arm forward. Son, are you telling me that you stabbed that man in the same house your daughter was in? This is too reprehensible for even me to listen to. For God's sake, Father, is there any way you can zip your lip? Do you have a shut up and listen prayer maybe you could tell? I thought you guys spent most of your time listening and not jabberjawing me about what I should, could, would, or might have done. Listen to the story, Father. You're like that annoying person always asking what's going to happen next in the movies. I'm saying for the last time, zip it and listen to the story. For a man of the cloth, Father, you're pretty annoying. I'm sorry, son, but I'm not perfect. Sometimes I wear my emotions on my sleeve. Well, then it's time to go sleeveless, Father. Now, if you're done, like I said, I started to lunge forward to stick it to Ames, but was loudly and abruptly interrupted. Ellis, stop! Just what do you think you're doing? It caught me by such a surprise that I whirled around, putting my back to Ames, and was absolutely stunned to be face to face with Sarah. I was speechless. I just stared and mumbled a few incomprehensible words in her direction. Our eyes met, which is only about 2 or 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Suddenly, I leveraged against my shoulders being tugged to the floor by grabbing for the bookcase. Ames grabbed me and began to wrestle me to the floor, then climbed on top of my wrist and began to choke me. You came here to kill me, didn't you? We were struggling on the floor, and I was fighting to get him off of me. I bucked my waist up, and Ames jumped up about 2 feet in the air, but he braced himself against the bookcase, knocking 2 entire rows of books onto the floor. The loud crash and Sarah screaming disturbed little Sarah, who was now crying loudly. Ames rewrapped my neck and leaned down, squeezing with a purpose. I was starting to see little speckles of light in front of my eyes, and I knew it was only seconds before I was unconscious and dead. I made one last plea to Sarah for help, and that's all I remember. I have no idea how long I was out, but all I recall was waking up with Ames draped over me and Sarah knelt down next to us, sobbing. I felt a bit claustrophobic with Ames lying on me, so I braced off the floor and pushed him off of me. What the hell happened? Sarah continued to wail. Sarah, what happened? By now I was on my knees and I could see the enormous bloodstain on the floor by his head. I rubbed a bit on my throat to alleviate some of the constriction pain. I grabbed Ames and turned him over. Sarah must have plunged my shank right into her father's left collarbone area, piercing his carotid artery. Wow, there was a lot of blood. Ellis, I didn't know what to do. I just reacted, Sarah said. He was trying to kill you. I had absolutely no idea what to tell Sarah. Ames struggled to talk. Ellis, you have to believe me that I was on your side. You going to prison were all part of the plan, and it was the only way I could save you and Sarah from Remedy. Ames struggled to talk and finish what he thought I should know. Ellis, you have a friend in prison. You just have to find him. He can help. I could tell that Ames was struggling with his words. Sarah, your daddy loves you, and tell little Sarah. Ames closed his eyes and let out a sigh and was gone. Sarah began to cry. I realized she'd just killed her father. Little Sarah was screaming in her crib. I didn't want to add to the situation, but I needed answers. Sarah, just what in the hell are you doing alive? Sarah stared blankly into space and provided not even a hint of an answer. I snapped my fingers a few times to get her attention. She looked in my direction, but I don't think it really registered. Sarah, we have to get the baby and get the hell out of here before someone finds us. We can't leave him like this, Ellis, Sarah insisted. Leave him like what, Sarah? He's dead. We can't let him die for nothing. We have to rid Cleveland of Remedy. Sarah, with you connected to me, there's no way anyone would believe that you killed him in self-defense of anything. Then let's pull him into the cellar, Ellis. It'll buy us time. Don't know why, but it made perfect sense. So we each grabbed an arm and pulled Sarah's dad down into the cellar and put him in the room under the plywood floor. Sarah and I walked back up to the kitchen area and just stood for a second looking at each other. Ellis, I know you said we need to get out of here, but where are we going to go? I don't know, Sarah. In fact, I really have to get back to prison or they're going to be looking for me. Ellis, don't go back. Sarah, I have to. They'll kill me for sure. And it'll put you and little Sarah in danger also. Listen to me, Sarah. Before we go any further, you have to answer some of my questions, or I can't feel good about this. I can't think of a different way to say this, but why the hell are you still alive? I watched you die, and it destroyed something in me that day. I didn't care about life like I used to. Sarah, since you've been gone, and I was in prison with no hope of anything, I've done some awful things. Ellis, I can see in your eyes that you're different, almost like you've grown up in a very short time. Sarah, I need to know what happened. Ellis, it was all part of Chev's plan. I faked my death so I could disappear and someday we'd be back together. I knew how much it hurt you, but I couldn't stand to be without you forever. Chev and I were working on how to free you. We didn't count on my dad getting little Sarah, nor did we see that they would get a hold of you. We thought all was lost until we heard from Rave about your rise to power in the prison. Screw that bastard. I became instantly angry. I still have some unfinished business with him. Well, Sarah, I'm a bit confused by my rise to power as well. It's not that complicated, Ellis. The warden knew that my father was investigating the case and very close to solving it, but they also knew that they couldn't just up and kill my father. Remedy and the warden involved you to send a message to my father, back off. But they never intended for you to push back the way you did. When you arrived at the prison, the warden knew how much you hated my father for what he had done to you, and he also knew that given your new status and situation that you might probably have my father killed or do it yourself to get little Sarah. When he heard that you had working knowledge of Remedy, you became a very interesting element to the warden. Once I heard about your rise to the top chair, I formed my own plan to help you with Chev. Guess that would make sense, Sarah, because other prisoners were telling me that they saw you at the prison. Yes, I was there a few times, but I couldn't let you know because then my father wouldn't trust me. Sarah, so what did we get out of the plan? Well, we got the Remedy book back. If you have the book, Sarah, then we need to find someone we can trust and we can turn this into the end of Remedy. Easier said than done, Ellis, because this is a huge organization that encompasses the town and the prison, and who else knows where. Ellis, another problem is that the head of Remedy is unknown. If we can't get to the Remedy's leader, then we'll never shut the organization down. Ellis, you should know that I could never have gotten a hold of the book without Rave's help. What do you mean, Sarah? The very night that you two took care of Clarice, my father made contact with Rave, and he knew you were in trouble. He has actually been helping Chev and me all along by feeding us information. It wasn't a problem because my dad thought I was dead, and with you and Chev thinking Rave was a traitor, my dad had no worries about Chev. Sarah, it's hard for me to believe that Rave the Innocent is that smart. Well, believe it, Ellis. Sarah and I were interrupted by a knock on the front door. I nervously started to stutter step in all directions. Relax, Ellis, as Sarah made her way to the front door. She disappeared for a second, and when she returned to the kitchen, Chev and Rave were close behind. What's up, Ellis? Chev announced. Rave wasn't so forward because I think he was unsure if I knew about his part in all this. There was a moment of awkwardness, but Then we all came together in the middle of the room for a group hug. "Thank you, guys." "Well, it isn't over yet," said Rave. "We still have to find a way to get out of this and find someone that can help take this demon called Remedy down. Listen, guys, as much as I don't want to, I have to go back to the prison. I have to, or I'll put all of us in danger. The warden will not feel comfortable with me on the streets. I feel good about going back, guys, because you've come up with a pretty good plan so far. Now we just need to see it through." "I don't know, Ellis," Chev said. "What if we can't save you? What then?" "Well, I think we'll just have to take our chances and see what happens. When do you need to go back, Ellis?" "Right away, so I don't raise any suspicions." "Can you wait an hour before you go back, Ellis?" Before I could even answer, Sarah grabbed me by the wrist and pulled me into the bedroom. "You'll have to excuse us, guys. Can you watch little Sarah for a while?" Sarah didn't even wait for a response. It was more like an order to Chev and Rave. Sarah closed the door and immediately started taking off my clothes. She grabbed my shirt and pulled it up over my head. He couldn't help but see my Brotherhood tattoo, big as life, on my stomach and chest. Sarah kept undressing me and said, "We'll talk about that later." Sarah proceeded to devour me as if it was her last meal, and I must say, I didn't have one complaint. It was good to experience my angel one more time before I went back to the heart of the devil. When Chev and I left, I tried to keep a stiff upper lip, but I was probably the biggest softy of the group, and tears did trickle down my face to match Sarah's. I said my goodbyes, and Chev drove me back to the prison. When we got there, I thanked Chev for always being a friend and never turning his back on me like he said he wouldn't. The surprise that Rave was so instrumental in helping me was still a tough pill to swallow, but I always had a soft spot for him. I barely made it into my cell, and I was called to the warden's office. Again, the warden shooed the guards away and got right down to business. "Showtime. You're late, my friend." "Yes, I am, but I had some business to take care of." I said it with the same authority and control that I had when I left the prison. The warden leaned back in his high-backed chair with a grin and began to laugh. Kids, they make me laugh. You have no idea how this game is played, do you, Paige?" "What do you mean, Warden?" "Well, how did your time go when you were away?" The warden asked this question as if he knew way more than meets the eye. I was back in prison, so I knew to say as little as possible. "Listen to me, Showtime. I know that the first thing you did was to go and attempt to avenge the wrong by getting the person that put you in here. The question is, did you?" I didn't answer the warden on purpose. The warden responded by saying, "Hey, I can send someone over there right now to find out if you did or you didn't." Hell, I knew that would lead them right to Sarah and little Sarah, so I reluctantly confirmed his suspicion. "Wonderful!" The warden applauded by quietly clapping his hands. "I will be sorry to see you go, Ellis. You're a good man." "What does that mean, see me go?" "Ellis, my naive boy, Remedy is facilitated from the prison. Ames was a mole, and I needed to get rid of him somehow. Once you started screwing his daughter, you were the perfect target, you and your goofy little friends. You don't know, Ellis, that every move you made was anticipated by our fire stomping group." "What the hell is a fire stomping group?" "Well, they take care of snoopers, accidents, moles, punk kids that won't take their medicine. You just happen to be the best chess piece in the whole game connected to Ames and Remedy." "Who else knows this besides me, Warden?" "Well, that's the beauty of the whole thing. Nobody now. With Ames out of the way and only you left, it will be business as usual soon. I have had you reassigned, Ellis, to a new area of the prison." My heart sunk because I thought for sure he was going to say that he was putting me in general population, and that was certain death for me. "Ellis, By the look on your face, I bet you're thinking that you're going to General. Don't worry, my boy. You're going to KYAG wing. Warden, what the hell's KYAG wing? Never heard of that. The warden sits up with a big SOB smile on his face. Sure you have, Ellis. It's the Kiss Your Ass Goodbye wing. Or as it's better known, Death Row. Ellis, you'll have an expedited visit straight to the front of the line. I was angry that it was going to end this way and they would get away with everything and go right back to business as usual. I didn't even think. I launched myself over the warden's desk, crashing us both onto the floor. I grabbed his neck and squeezed so hard my knuckles hurt. I'll kill you, Warden. The warden's eyes were almost bugging out of his head. I felt a dull pain in the back of my head, and the next thing I knew, I was lying on the floor of my new cell. I tried to sit up, but I just felt too dizzy. I rubbed what felt like a huge knot on the back of my head, and also the source of my pain. Eventually, I got myself up to the cot and started to get my senses back. The guard came back in and checked on me. After taking a look, he walked out and the warden reappeared shortly. Ellis, I scheduled you for expiration at midnight tonight. The warden chuckles a bit. Expiration is PC. You know, for killing someone. What happened to me, you bastard? Oh, Ellis, you had a little tantrum and tried to choke me. So my guard introduced you to his nightstick. Ellis, don't worry, son. You won't feel a thing, and you'll get all the trimmings, just like a true death row inmate would. I may be a bastard, but you can't say I'm not a good host. Tell the guard what you'd like for your last meal, and we'll accommodate your wish. I mean, it's the least we can do for your service and the fact that you took care of our little problem. I'll see you in hell, Warden. Sorry, Ellis, I'm already running it. And like that, the warden was gone. I sat back on the cot and the father just stared at me and for the first time said absolutely nothing. You know, Father, I wish I had a better ending for you. That was one hell of a story, Ellis. Thank you for sharing it with me. And now I must go, son. You're leaving, Father? Yes, I must go now. I have some other business to tend to. The father got up and began to walk toward the cell door. Father, wait. Can you help me do something just in case I goof it up? I didn't even wait for the father's response. I put my hands together and started quietly. Lord, please forgive me for my sins. I offer my soul to you as long as you take care of Sarah and little Sarah. Please let them know that I love them. Lord, I know now that it was selfish for me to ask you to get me out of this, and I'd be religious. Thank you for the joys in my life like Rave and Chev, Sarah and little Sarah, and even my parents who didn't believe in me. I forgive and will miss everyone, and I hope they miss me. Amen. That was very nice, Ellis. May God be with you, son. The father crossed himself and left the cell. I sat and waited, watching the clock get closer and closer to midnight. Just like clockwork, I heard the cell keys jingling at 11:58 toward my cell, only this time I wasn't sweating and so uptight. Old friends walk in and circle around me with the same routine. Gentlemen, are you ready? Yes, Captain. Dead man walking. Ellis Page, you've been sentenced to death by lethal injection for the murder of one Sarah Colleen Ames and for the murder of Bo Dixon Mathers. Your punishment is to be carried out on this day, 12/25/2008, at the San Quentin Prison in the great state of California at exactly midnight. You guys didn't bring me a Christmas present. Please stand, the head guard ordered. I wasn't as nervous this time. Officer, would it help if I told you that I was innocent? The officer didn't even respond. If I've learned anything, officer, I've learned that life is not fair, nor will it ever be. Prisoner, walk, the guard commanded. I had to take a parting shot. Guys, how does it feel to know you're killing an innocent man? I felt a shove from behind from one of the guards, and we were on our way to my final destination. I was hoping it'd take a long time to get there, but unfortunately the killing room was only about 20 feet from my cell. I walked into the cold, sterile chamber and looked around to only see a table with straps on it and a tray on wheels with medical supplies. The guards helped me waddle in, then they took off my restraints. "Prisoner, lay down on the table," the guard commanded. When I laid down, I quickly felt the straps tighten on my wrists, waists, and ankles. The head guard put a funny spiral cable across my chest. He must have noticed that I was wondering what that was. "This is your heart monitor, Ellis. It'll tell us when you've passed." The guard stepped back against the walls of the circular nightmare. A man walked in with a white coat on and said nothing. I assumed he was the doctor. He leaned over and put a stethoscope on my chest and listened. My heart must have been beating like the Energizer bunny pounding on his drum. The doctor stood up and grabbed something out of the steel tray. I could feel him touch my arm, and soon I heard a snap of a tight rubber band around my arm. "Ellis, you'll feel a bit of a stick, so brace yourself." "Doc, I'm about to die. I think that's the least of my worries. Every time I have had any type of blood work, it was a pin-cushion nightmare trying to find a vein. But the doc hit pay dirt the very first time. Figures." "God bless you, son," the doctor said, and he was gone as fast as he entered. The guards walked forward and rechecked the straps. Once they were convinced that I was secure, the head guard picked up the phone on the wall, had a short chat, and hung up. Sadly, I knew it was showtime for showtime. I could hear the curtains electronically opening to my chamber. I could see nothing as of yet. The guard walked over and grabbed a lever on the side of the table, and the head end started to tilt up facing the crowd. The lights were bright. I could see a room full of people sitting facing me. I don't even really know why, but I felt a wave of embarrassment come over me, just as if I were guilty as charged. I was a criminal on display, a circus freak, if you will. My eyes began to adjust, and I could start to make out some of the faces in the crowd. I could see Mather's parents sit, and his mom with a Kleenex in her hands in her lap. His stepfather stared straight through me. I looked around more, and I could see my parents sitting on the other side of the room. They just sat shamefully in their seats. There was no sign of Chev or Rave. I wasn't even sure if they knew this was happening. I looked more and could see someone standing in the middle of the aisle, which was odd because everyone was sitting. I focused and cracked a smile at Sarah and little Sarah. She smiled back, bouncing little Sarah on her arm. I knew right at this moment that there is a heaven, and that the Father was right all along. We stared at each other for the longest time until the warden butted in on my short-lived bliss. I was content knowing the last thing I would see was my angels' faces. "Ellis Page," the warden barked, "you've been sentenced to death by lethal injection on this day at exactly midnight. Is there anything that you'd like to say for yourself before we carry out your sentence?" I looked around the room at everyone with a very long silence. I knew in my head that I had 1,000 reasons to give a big speech about how innocent I was or how I'd been wronged by so many, but that'd only take away from the ominous glow that was all around me. I could feel that the Lord was standing right next to me with his hand on my shoulder. Sarah was shaken and had tears in her eyes now. With a shake in my voice, I proclaimed that I only had one thing to say. I looked at Sarah and blocked everything and everyone out and proudly said, "Sarah, I love you." Thank you, Lord, for such a gift. I had such a heavenly surge in my body that I felt nothing but good. I could see just beyond Sarah that the Father was standing against the back wall, but he wasn't wearing his collar, he was wearing a suit. He gave me a reassuring smile and winked at me. The warden, without skipping a beat, explained, "With that being said, roll on one." I could feel a warm, burning sensation in my arm. I immediately felt so tired I could not keep my eyes open. I tried to focus on Sarah as long as I could, but shortly my eyes closed, and I only had the image of my two angels in my head in my now complete darkness. It was a strange feeling to be motionless but able to think. I felt the shake on the table as he ordered, "Roll on two." The table shook again, and I thought that was strange because I knew that a roll on two would stop my heart cold. The table began to shake even more, and my head moved from side to side. I could hear someone saying something loudly, but it was just too blurred to make out. Desperately tried to open my eyes, but my thoughts would never turn into action. I can remember thinking that the Father was right. I must be in the afterlife. I smiled in my head because I must be in the presence of God. They must have been speaking to me as I heard, "Ellis, wake up," which was accompanied by a gentle shake. I opened my right eye slightly and was stunned to find that God was my mom. "Mom, you're God?" I looked to the left and could see my dad sitting in the chair next to me. Confused, "What are you two doing in heaven?" I quickly looked side to side. I tried to set up, but it must have been too soon as a wave of dizzy forced me right back down. "Rest and relax, Ellis," my dad said. "You've been through a lot, Ellis." "What's going on?" I sluggishly demanded. "Ellis, relax. We'll fill you in on the whole sordid story when you're up and around." I closed my eyes and didn't wake up till the following day at 9 a.m., sleeping almost 29 hours. Slowly, I crawled out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. My parents were sitting at the table having coffee. I sat down still with a show of resentment that they did not back me up with some sort of belief in me. I looked at both and said, "Well, is someone going to tell me what the hell's going on?" "Ellis," my father snapped back, "I will not have that sort of talk in front of your mother." I sat up and gave them a stare and crossed my arms. I heard the main kitchen door swing open and close. "Hi, sleepyhead." My mom looked endearingly over at Sarah. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "She lives here, Ellis," my dad said. "I would never put my grandbaby and her mother in the street, Ellis." I looked over at Sarah with what must have been the come-hither look, and my dad jumped all over it. "Ellis, you will be in separate rooms." After a big silence, we all kind of laughed a bit. Sarah sat down and began to explain that it was probably easier if she tells the story. "Ellis, my father's been investigating Remedy for a very long time. He, in fact, had infiltrated the organization, gathering some serious evidence that would put an end to this killing machine once and for all. Prison warden figured out through a tip that my father was a mole, but he could never outright have a cop killed because then it might lead back to him. Plus, that's a Remedy rule that you cannot kill someone that will cause more harm than good to the Remedy organization. The organization surveyed your friends in the situation and chose Clarice to be your set. However, they never anticipated that you would dump the body and begin investigating for yourself. This, Ellis, really caused a problem for them. However, they turned it into a positive by escalating your stature in the prison and giving you the power to get my father. As far as my death, they just pushed that your way because you were already known as a killer, so it made sense. My father sadly used you, Ellis, because he knew you might be able to get close to the warden and get some information. That is why you had to go to prison. My father could tell that they were trying to get him through you, and going to prison was the safest for you by far. My father knew it would buy you time because they wouldn't kill you until you finished their task. Sarah, are you kidding me? Have you been to prison? I pulled up my shirt. Look at this and tell me if you think it's safe. My dad took one look at my tattoo and blew a gasket. Ellis, that is the stupidest damn thing you've ever done. What the hell is wrong with your head, son? Dad, I thought we weren't going to have that sort of talk in this house. I just shook my head because I knew there was no talking to old school. I said the only response that I could. "You're right, Dad. I don't know what I was thinking." After a short silence, Sarah began explaining more. "Ellis, this has been a chess game from the beginning, and you coming after my dad was completely a move on the warden's part. He knew you had a hatred for my dad for what he had done to you, so he just made the next move by agreeing to your freedom on occasion and escalated your status in the prison so you could do damage control for Remedy. Once you reported that the mole was dead, there was no need to have you around anymore, so off to death row you went." "Well, that makes a lot of sense to me, but how did you guys know that you could save me in time?" Sarah looks at me with a sheepish look. "It wasn't until I found a way to get into the execution under a different name that our plan started to unfold." "Ellis, can you get the door, son?" "Yeah, I guess so, Dad." I walked to the door and grabbed the handle, and the fear I had felt in the previous times of opening the door came right back. I hesitated instead, called out, "Who is it?" A deep, pleasant voice responded by saying, "The Cleveland Police Department." "Chev, you jackass." I grabbed the handle and yanked the door open. "Father, what are you doing here?" "May I come in, Ellis?" I stammered. "Sure, I guess so." My dad poked his head out of the kitchen and waved to the father to come on in. "Dad, what's going on?" I walked back into the kitchen and the father hugged my mom. "Is anyone going to tell me what's going on?" "Ellis, I'd like you to meet Mr. Ames' partner, police officer Keaton Edwards." "What? You're not a priest?" "No, I'm sorry to say, Ellis, I'm not. I knew something was funny when we talked in the cell, Father." "Ellis, you don't have to call me Father. Ellis, you never had a chance at dying in the chamber because the only active injection was the painkiller." I became angry. "You guys let me think I was gonna die?" "We had to," the father explained. "Once Remedy knew that someone else was aware of their secrets, it was the perfect time to make our move. When they blamed Sarah's death on you, we almost had them. It wasn't until they charged you with her death and proceeded with the execution that we knew we could make it stick. Sarah was alive and standing right there, and the warden vocalized the override to have you killed in the viewing room. Once we made the arrest, the warden sang like a bird and will now be in prison for life. The warden named more than 430 people involved in Remedy, and it's all because of what you've done, Ellis." Both of my parents looked at me with that prideful look that parents get when they realize that their son is not the bum they thought he was. "Sarah, what name did you use to get in the prison?" I asked. "Are you ready for this, Ellis?" "I used Remedy Quentin. Chev Rave and I relied on the fact that you were so whipped and that your last words would be something about me, and you couldn't have delivered any better. Ellis, Sarah, I love you, saved your life." The guards tried to quiet me up and whisk me out of the room, but at that moment the father took over. "What do you mean?" "He departed from your cell because he completely believed your story and went straight to the state police. The father's not a priest at all. He's an undercover police officer that worked for my father. I do remember looking around the room and seeing a whole bunch of people I've never seen before. Yes, Ellis, all state police officers. Sarah, so let me get this straight. You sons of bitches let me almost get killed so you can catch and shut down Remedy?" "Ellis," my father scolded. "You know what, Dad? I've been in prison, almost died, and killed people. If I want to swear, I will." "Well, you are a hero, Ellis," Sarah explained. "When they said go on too, it was disabled, so it could have never stopped your heart." "Oh, well, that makes me feel better." "We are so proud of you, Ellis." Sarah slid over and gave me a big hug. "I love you, Ellis," Sarah whispered. My dad rolled his eyes. "You know, Mom, he's just too young for all this." My mom, in typical fashion, "I don't know. I think it's cute. Ellis, when are you two getting married?" "Married? Mom, I have to go." "Where you going, Ellis?" I kept right on walking because I knew the fifth degree was coming from my mom. I quickly changed my clothes to head over to Chev's house. On the way out, Sarah walked out of the kitchen and had little Sarah in her outreached arms. Here you go, Daddy. I couldn't help but to take a deep breath in, and after a few big whiffs, I dry heaved a few times. Oh my God, what is that smell? Mind you, I've smelt the worst of the worst, the dead of the dead, but this was beyond anything I could stomach. Sarah pushed little Sarah toward me. Time to change baby's diaper, Daddy. Lord, I prefer the bodies. What have I got myself into? What did you say, Ellis? I have to stop verbalizing my every thought. Nothing, sweetie. I'll change a diaper if you show me how. After I cleaned up from being knee-deep in poop, I headed over to Shev's house. I knocked on the door, and he answered eating a perushki, a breaded meat wrap. Hey, Ellis, come on in. We sat in the kitchen, and almost immediately Bronson, Shev's father, appeared in his underwear. Only this time I was much less afraid because Bronson could never compare to the characters in prison. After Bronson left, I began to thank Shev for helping save my worthless butt. Shev was never very good at accepting thank you, so he cut me off pretty quick by saying, Hey, what are friends for? Hey, Ellis, did I tell you that Bert nailed Renee the tray in the bathroom last night? We called him Bert because he had that monobrow that Bert does from Sesame Street. You know, Bert and Ernie. Shev continued. Bronson flipped his lid and came down in his underwear, throwing the whole lot of us out because they were making too much noise in the bathroom. I just sat back and smiled, knowing that things were getting back to normal. Cleveland would never be the same, nor would I. Ellis Page, a.k.a. Showtime. I went through hell and back to find love, and I'll tell all that'll listen. It's worth it. I could hear Shev's front door open and close quickly as Rave walked straight into the kitchen. Rave put his hands on his knees to catch his breath. Rave looked at Shev and me with deep panic in his eyes. You guys will never believe who's dead now. I have to be honest, I had had just about enough of death and all that goes with it. Although I was seriously considering the police force as a career after how I handled the situation. All right, Rave, I'll bite. Who's dead? Rave paused for a considerable amount of time. You, Ellis. I laughed with a cross between confusion and disbelief. What the hell does that mean, Rave? I don't even want to tell you, Ellis. Shev butted in. I bet you knocked up someone else, didn't you, Ellis? And Sarah's gonna kill you. Rave became fairly serious for him. What does the Brotherhood mean? I felt my body become completely tense at the sound of those words. I forgot all about what Stallone said. You can only get out by death. Rave, how do you know about this? I ran into some pretty scary guys that were looking for you, Ellis. They said that you and they had some unfinished business. I immediately became frightened for Sarah and little Sarah because if they could find Rave, they could find my angels. Did they say who they were, Rave? I was pretty scared, Ellis, but I kind of remember hearing something like Bullseye and Durant. I'm not positive because the Bullseye guy called him Buns at a Slant also, whatever that means. Do you know these guys, Ellis? Shev asked. Unfortunately, I do. Bullseye is the guy that can find anyone, anytime, anywhere, and Buns at a Slant is probably the most efficient killer I've ever seen. There is no doubt in my mind that Stallone is back in power over the Brotherhood, and he's pissed that I tried to have him killed. Jesus, Ellis. Shev actually started to show a little emotion. We were supposed to be running around trying to have frivolous sex adventures and doing the stupid stuff that teenage boys do. Instead, I'm spending all my time saving your sorry ass. I put my hands in the air and crossed them back and forth to Shev. Hey, listen, this is my problem. I'll handle it. This is your problem? Shev yelled. Who in the hell do you think they'd kill trying to get to you, idiot? You're friends. Rave butts in. Listen, nobody's going to kill anyone. I told them to meet at your house, Ellis, at 3 o'clock so we can settle this once and for all. I think we can talk our way out of this. Talk our way out of this? Rave, what the hell is wrong with you telling them where my family lives? You don't know these guys, Rave. Killing is just business as usual to them. Rave's cheeks became red with embarrassment. I was just trying to help, Ellis. I knew I had to get to my house quickly to protect Sarah and little Sarah. I told both Rave and Chev as I ran to my car. You two talk to no one and keep a low profile, do you understand? I jumped in the car and raced towards my parents' house. I was really uptight because I wasn't sure what I'd find at home. I finally pulled up in front of the house. I ran to the front door and my heart sunk. I could see from 10 feet away that the door jamb and the door were all busted up. I didn't even want to go in for fear of what I might see. I walked to the door and peered through, looking into the living room. The place was just a mess. I was worried because Stallone knew he could get to me through Sarah and little Sarah. I took a step in the door and waded through periodic rubble from what appeared to be the result of some sort of struggle. I quickly made my way to the back of the house down the hallway. I started looking from room to room. About halfway down the hallway, I was startled a bit by the ringing of the telephone. I cautiously looked around for anyone and made my way to the kitchen. I grabbed a receiver, putting it to my ear. After a pause, I said, "Hello?" "Showtime, my old pal. Cut the shit, Stallone. What have you done with Sarah and little Sarah?" I think the proper question, Showtime, is what I haven't done with them. I went from zero to psycho in less than a second. "Stallone, if you touched either one of them, I'll kill you. Do you understand me?" I have to say, Ellis, I'm really scared. I think you forgot, Ellis, that you are on the Brotherhood's most wanted list. You're not going to touch me, Ellis. You tried to have me killed in prison and failed. Now it's your turn. Showtime, I left a little present so you know I'm serious about what I say. You'll turn yourself into the Brotherhood or people will start dying one by one, courtesy of good old Ellis Page. I now had a dial tone in my hand. I put the receiver back in the cradle. My mind was just spinning with what to do. It dawned on me that Stallone said he left me a present, whatever that meant. I headed for the hallway again and started to look room to room. My bedroom door was closed, and again I stopped outside the door. I wasn't taking any chances, so I went into my dad's bedroom closet where he kept the old Winchester 30-30. This rifle could stop an elephant in its tracks. It had been in the family for almost 100 years and was in pristine condition. I took the rifle out of its case and opened the hand-cocking mechanism. I slid one of the 2.5-inch long rounds into the chamber, then snapped the handle in place. I walked toward the door, still with some hesitation, but definitely with a little more attitude in case someone was still in here. I arrived at my door, and I put my ear closer to listen. I could hear nothing, so I grabbed the door handle and began to twist it open. I used the barrel of the gun to open the door the rest of the way in case I had to shoot quickly. After I pushed the door open, I looked around and visually stopped at the bed. There was obviously someone in the bed. I flashed back to the last time I was here with Sarah, but this was different. Whom was I going to find? I flashed through all the possibilities in my head. Above the bed on the wall, there was writing which appeared to be in blood, and it read, "Remedy lives." Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye at the bedroom door, I saw a figure flash into the room. Smoke everywhere, and the gunpowder sporadically burned my face and hand. The butt of the gun jammed into my shoulder from the kickback, almost knocking me down. It took a second for me to get my senses about me and for the ringing in my ears to stop. I could see that whoever it was had crouched down in a ball. I had never fired a gun, and obviously I missed my target. "Are you out of your damn mind, Ellis?" Chev's eyes were as big as saucers. You could have killed me." "Chev, I couldn't help it. You scared the crap out of me." "I don't know why, Chev, but I thought you might stay put like I asked." I was trying to control my breathing, and Chev was already visually scanning the room. "Hey, who's in the bed?" "I'm not sure. Chev, I got a call from the head of the Brotherhood, and he said I'm the #1 most wanted. I think he's also done something to Sarah and little Sarah." "Okay, so who's in the bed, Ellis?" "Chev, I'm afraid to look under the comforter. What if it's Sarah?" Chev starts walking toward me. "I'll do it, Ellis." "Hold on, Chev. I need more bullets." What if someone's under there and I need to shoot? Chev looked over his shoulder. Like, are you serious, Ellis? I don't think he trusted me with a gun. I ran back to my dad's closet and grabbed the box of bullets. Chev must have already pulled the comforter back. Oh my God! That is just nasty. What? I yelled back. Ellis, you don't want to come in here. I walked toward the room with all sorts of thoughts in my head of who it could be. What is it, Chev? I don't know, Ellis. Some guy. I'm not even sure who. I walked to the door and looked at Chev holding the comforter up to take a look, but it blocked my view. I walked more to the side of the bed so I could see. It only took a second for me to focus, and I yelled out, "No! No, no, no!" By now, I was on my knees just staring at the father's face. Ellis, Chev yelled out, "What's wrong? Who is this guy?" "Oh my God, Father." Chev looked confused. "It's not your dad, Ellis." "I know, Chev, it's the father from prison. Well, he's really a cop, and he helped me get out." I was so upset I could hardly look at the father. Chev continued to look the body over by pulling the comforter back, further exposing more of the body. "Whoa, Ellis, take a look at this." I straightened up to get a better view. I could see that the father's head was severed at the neck, but the mysterious thing was that his head was on top of a female's body. Right away I thought that maybe it was Sarah. "Chev, I have to know if that's Sarah's body." "What, Ellis? How are you going to know that?" "Sarah had a birthmark on the side of her left breast. If this body has that, I know it's her." "Dude, you're really starting to freak me out, Ellis, looking at corpses' breasts. You don't get it, Chev. I have to know if it's her." "Chev, I need you to turn your back." "Turn my back for what? I've seen 100 chicks naked." "True, but I don't want you seeing my Sarah that way." "All right, but if it's not her, can I look?" "Chev, you have some serious psychological issues." I turned my attention again to the body. I was frightened to put my hands on the body. This sort of thing, just plain and simple, freaks me out. The body had a circular-colored, low-cut shirt on, so I hesitatingly grabbed the shirt and pulled it down far enough so I could see her breast. I let out a sigh of relief. I knew that it wasn't Sarah. "It's not her, Chev. You can look now." "I'm not gonna look, you sicko. I was just kidding." "Ellis, you have some serious issues. You know that, don't you?" "Chev, what the hell does all this mean? Why would they put a man's head on a woman's body?" "I don't know, Ellis. This stuff is just too sick, even for me." Again, I could hear the phone ring in the kitchen. I jumped over the corner of the bed and ran to the kitchen. Chev followed me and stood next to me. I picked up the receiver. "What do you want?" "You know what I want. I want you on a platter, Showtime." "I'll ask again, Ellis. Who's next? Is it going to be your pretty little woman and her little dog, too? I love that movie, Ellis, The Wizard of Oz. Have you seen it? I feel like the wizard right now, controlling people's lives." Sloan starts laughing in a lower, sinister voice. Something just came over me and I belted out, "I knew it was you." "You knew it was me what, Ellis?" "You were in the bushes that night at my house, and you were in my bed when I pulled the covers down, acting like you were dead. When I saw you in the prison, I knew I'd seen you before, but I couldn't place the face up to the present moment. I must have walked in on you while you were in my house. Yes, Ellis, that was a bit of a fright for me, but I relied on your apprehension to deal with the dead. If you had touched me, you would have known that I was still warm. You are also the one I saw at the mine that night when there was a fire, and you hit Chev in the head with a shovel. You purposely misled me to think it was your son, Bo, behind all this. You're Bo's father, you son of a bitch. You're the one that had Egbert and Mary killed, aren't you?" After a long pause, Well, Ellis, you're a much smarter boy than I anticipated. In fact, I was kind of beginning to like you when I thought you were just a little chicken shit afraid of your own shadow. It's a shame that you have to turn out to be such a pain in the ass, because Remedy could have really used a guy like you. If it wasn't for your grandfather messing with Mary, none of this would have happened. After my parents split up, no one cared about me. They all spent their time doting on the new baby, and my dad was beside himself with grief. and could never be a father again. You're the one, Stallone, the warden was talking about when he said he knew about my connection to Remedy. You're also the one that locked me in the mine with all the dead bodies. Very good, Ellis, but you still haven't figured out the best part. Who's that in your bed? Yeah, I have to admit, I am a bit stumped on that one. Well, I wasn't going to tell you, Ellis, but since you'll be dead in short order, why not? The woman's body is my ex-wife, and the father was her lover. Oh yes, they had a torrid affair too and refused to stop seeing each other. I couldn't compete with an ex-wife that ruined my medical practice and a cop that arranged for me to go to jail when I tried to have her killed. The two wanted to be together so bad, I made their wish come true. And what a better way to do it than to make them one. You really are a sick bastard, Stallone. I'm guessing you killed Clarice to get back at your son for going with your ex-wife and not choosing you, didn't you? And what a better fall guy than your son's worst enemy, Ellis Page. Ellis. We all have our perils and paths in life. My son got what he deserved, but I didn't kill him. I know that, Stallone, because I do know who killed him. I could hear Stallone take a deep breath. You better tell me right now who killed my son. I didn't answer. Did you hear me, Showtime? He's the only thing that has ever been important to me. Yeah, I heard you, Stallone, but we both have something each other needs, and I'm not willing to give until I get. Stallone, I have one question for you. Why didn't the warden sell you out like he did everyone else? Oh, that's simple, Ellis. If you remember the Remedy rules, never tell on your own. I am Remedy. The warden is in prison now, and I own the prisons, and I own you, Showtime. Stallone, it's gonna be fun to kill you. I hung up the phone and looked at Chev. I started to say something to Chev, but both of us stopped and looked toward the living room because we could hear footsteps walking toward the kitchen on broken glass. I motioned for Chev to follow me behind a counter. I used it as a barricade. I put my elbows on the counter and propped the rifle up ready to blast anyone that came into the kitchen. I could hear that they were getting closer, so I tightened my grip on the handle and moved my finger on the hairline trigger. Suddenly, the swinging door flew open, and I pulled the trigger, exploding a blast at our attackers. The wall clock exploded in a million pieces. Unfortunately, that clock is about 5 feet from where I was actually shooting. The smoke was beginning to clear, and Chev and I could clearly see that Bullseye and Buns at a slant were coming right for us. Jesus, Ellis, you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Chev panicked and grabbed a kitchen knife out of the holder and threw it in the direction of Buns at a slant. A perfect throw. The knife stuck right in his upper left chest area. Durant fell to the ground, leaving only Bullseye. Bullseye stopped as he quickly realized that he was outmatched. Chev let out a yell. Did you see that, Ellis? Where the hell did you learn to do that, Chev? Well, let's just say I have class. And it's a given that the chicks dig me. That's all you need to know, Ellis. The kitchen door began to open, and Stallone let out a sinister laugh as he walked in. Well, Showtime. I guess the final chapter's been written. And once I kill you, it's business as usual, and the bonus is I get your buddy, too. Didn't I tell you to get rid of him in prison, Showtime? Well, I don't know about that, Stallone, but I do know that you are completely outmatched. Outmatched? It's 2 against 2. How do you figure I'm outmatched? Stallone, try 4 against 1. 4 against 1? How do you figure? Stallone's eyes went blank. Stallone stumbled forward, and blood trickles out of the corner of his mouth. Well, because Bullseye's a cop and Rave is right behind you. Stallone took a step forward and fell forward, face down on the floor. Rave was standing behind Mather's father, slingshot still in his hand. That's for Clarice, you son of a bitch. Chev exploded on Rave. Are you crazy shooting that damn thing in our direction? You could have killed us. Chev, I knew I wasn't going to miss again. I may be sheep, but I've learned to hit the right spot. How did you know to come here, Rave? I asked. Like I said, Ellis, told them to meet us here at 3 o'clock so we could talk about things. I looked for the wall clock only to realize that I had blown it into a million pieces. Bullseye looked at his watch. 3:05, Ellis. What about Sarah and little Sarah? Oh, they're at my house. I asked them to be. Chev and I looked at each other thinking the same thing. We could no longer call Rave the sheet. He had made his rite of passage to being a man. Thanks for listening to Sarah, I Love You, The Adventures of Ellis Page. I hope you had as much fun on the ride as I did creating it. I'm excited to announce The Adventures of Ellis Page continue. Join Rave, Chev, and Ellis in Black Sable. Sarah, I Love You, written and narrated by Jeffrey John Edwards. The end.